So welcome to the Beam Alliance Roundtable on antimicrobial resistance in the era of COVID-19. We're talking about leveraging the pharmaceutical strategy to prevent the next pandemic. So this virtual roundtable, we're going to assess how to define the best possible European policy and regulatory framework on AMR, as well as providing the EU, national policymakers and relevant stakeholders with concrete examples of support mechanisms for new antimicrobials from Europe and beyond. And just to let you know that this session will be recorded, and we invite you to participate later on as well, sending questions. You have the chat function there, so please, you don't have to wait for the Q&A sessions. You can send other questions, but during the Q&A, we'll open the floor as well, and we'll take questions for our panelists at that point as well. I'm Brian Maguire. I'm here in Brussels. We had President Biden about 150 meters from where I'm sitting yesterday. And it's a little quieter around here, but it's extremely warm. So I hope you're all with whatever liquid will keep you cool for this afternoon as well. Gin and tonics will be provided, I'm told, by Uber Eats. In the meantime, let me introduce Florence Séjourné. She's the Beam Alliance president, and she's going to set out the business perspective this afternoon. Florence, good of you to join us. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian, for coordinating this afternoon with us. So I would like first to thank very much all the Beam Alliance team, board members, and our partner Nove to coordinate this roundtable. And of course, a big thank to speakers for today's discussion, as well as all the attendees. We really hope that it's going to be a good moment to exchange on the current situation. So I will start by introducing who is the Beam Alliance, who are we, and what are the issues we are facing today as an introductory talk. So we can go to the next slide. So a few words on the Beam Alliance. We represent all the biotech companies from Europe innovating in antimicrobial resistance research. We have been funded in 2016. We are in 16 countries in the European Union and are today 69 members. Altogether, we are developing more than 130 different molecules, products, strategies to combat antimicrobial resistance. The objective of the Beam Alliance, which is a non-profit association, was to give its members a unique voice to represent SMEs in order to propose and support policies, incentives in antimicrobial R&D in Europe, of course, in a One Health perspective. So Beam is the key industry stakeholders regarding innovative AMR product development conducted in Europe. Next slide. So what is AMR? Well, probably all the attendees here know that well, but just as a reminder, it's the phenomena of resistance of pathogens to antimicrobial agents. Why is it an issue? Because it became today a threat to modern medicine, as we use antibiotics to fight against infection, but as well as support treatment of many other diseases, chemotherapy for cancer, surgery, transplant. And as we speak now, 2021, it already impacts our lives. It believes that today AMR is killing 700,000 deaths worldwide, and including 33,000 in Europe every year. And it cost 1.5 million euro in Europe. So it is an important threat. We believe innovation can help fix this. And next slide. The innovation is clearly needed to bring solutions to fight against resistant pathogens. Why and what do we develop within companies in the Beam Alliance? Are strategies to limit the systemic rise of resistance to antimicrobials under a whole spectrum of solutions: prevention, diagnostics, and therapy. And now that we've gone through that COVID crisis, certainly those three words, prevention, diagnostic, therapy, speak to everyone. And this is what represents the pipeline of all the companies part of the Beam Alliance. Next slide. Why today do we have an issue there with a stalled innovation? There is a medical need. We've seen that. We have ideas. We've seen this as well. Well, the business model behind what we do is actually broken. It is actually scaring off investors because it doesn't make enough money for private investors to continue investing in that field. So why is that? Basically, there are a series of reasons, but to give you two main reasons. One is because the volumes of sales of new antibiotics especially is really low, because those products are actually kept on shelves in reserve to limit the rise of resistance and keep it only for those patients having severe infections, resistant infections. And on the other side, because the antibiotics have been on the market for many years. Many of them, nearly all of them, are generic drugs, so their prices are extremely low. And the pricing policy are used to compare new drugs with old and cheap generic drugs. So the value behind new antibiotics is really compared to another many old years of practice, and this has to change. So basically the R&D costs that we need to fund within biotech companies are higher than the potential return on investment, which is the explanation of this broken business model. Next slide. So we have ideas, we have people experienced in developing products up to market, but we have a very big struggle today. And this is very complex for us to understand that, because we believe the medical need is here. So we definitely need support to reinstall confidence in our business models. Why do we have trouble in advancing our asset? There has been in the last 10 years some support for R&D, public funding, and many of us in Europe actually had trouble getting access to that public funding, and so the public funding does not always reach SMEs sufficiently and effectively, so we rely on those private investors. The second point is, often in the biotech business we need partners through big pharma alliances for late stage development, and there is hardly any large pharma company investing in antibiotic research now. Third, the methods to demonstrate differentiation and clinical utility of new molecules are missing, and that leads to that low pricing valuation and possible misuse as well. And at the end, of course, we need to combat resistance to antibiotics, and stewardship policies are a must, but indeed lead to low volumes of sale. So at the end of the day, even though some biotech companies in Europe develop very valuable products, they eventually will fall bankrupt, or the revenues they would expect would never allow to recoup R&D investment, and which is associated to that private investors in pharma deserting the field. So that's typically and clearly exposing the issue we're facing in that field. And therefore, on the next slide, what we would like to ask today policymakers to again reinforce a lot is to accelerate R&D of new programs through push incentives. So there have been clearly some initiatives already there, but we still have some additional work there to do together. And obviously the second part, which is the pull incentives to fix market failure, which is the main role of the current policy discussions today, which we hope that will end up not only in words but in action. So the push incentives are more there to de-risk R&D step, but they cannot fix the problem alone. We need pull incentives, which will probably end up being a mix of measures to save the portfolio and the developers behind. Next slide. There is a clear political will to move forward in Europe today. There is a clear emphasis on AMR in the EU Pharmaceutical Strategy with 3 flagships. Flagship 1 is a pilot approach to R&D and public procurement for AMR. Flagship 2 is the setup of HERA, the EU Health Emergency Response Authority, which is there to cover any risk like COVID, but as well includes AMR. Flagship 3 is the review of the pharmaceutical registration. And in parallel of that emphasis in the EU pharmaceutical strategy, which we will discuss a lot today during the roundtable, there has been very recently on May 21 in Roma, high-level meetings pushing for quick actions. And we just copied here what the leading countries in G7 published during their latest meeting, and that was led by the UK to work together in the second half of the year and with health colleagues and financial colleagues to explore market incentives for antibiotic drug development. So clearly the momentum is there. And my last slide, I believe, is a very clear message and a very nice introduction to today's roundtable. It's now time to turn words into concrete actions. We can see this, we can feel this, and we definitely hope it's going to be there. There has been a lot of reports written in the last 5 years, but actually little action, especially on the pull incentives, have been taken. In Europe, we know health is a national competency, and so it requires member states' commitment. The European Commission plays an absolute instrumental coordination role on that new issue. And it's definitively interesting for us to see how much COVID-19 pandemic taught us that solutions collectively can be found, but at high cost if unprepared. So we definitely must take action now to avoid a new pandemic. And today, all the speakers and attendees will browse in the different instruments embedded in the EU Pharmaceutical Strategy, and we hope to gain further insights into how it will be implemented and how it will provide our vision to be designed and best suited to SMEs' need. So thank you again, everyone, and Brian, back to you.
Florence, thank you so much. And that sets the scene. It's clear what's at stake now, and we need to be focused on what needs to be done. So we're going to hear a lot more about that over the next couple of hours. And Timo Volken, a German member of the European Parliament, sits with the Social Democrats and Vice Chair of the European Parliament's AMR Interest Group. The floor is yours, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so we jumped directly in. That's good. I was just adjusting the lights, but I can skip that. I think you can see me. Good, perfect. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak at today's roundtable on AMR. So yeah, maybe. Of course, I need to start with the reference to the pandemic, right? So this pandemic has reminded us, the world, of the serious threat that emerging infectious diseases can pose to human health and our economies. And in addition, it has highlighted the need for increased monitoring and surveillance tools, improved infection prevention and control practices, and of course, access to rapid diagnostic tests and developing effective and affordable medicines and vaccines. So these deficiencies revealed, however, have long been recognized in the fight against antimicrobial resistances. So antibiotics are vital medicines in the treatment of infections. So without them, common infections that we can treat today would become fatal tomorrow. Treatments for diabetes management, for example, for major surgeries or organ transplantation would put patients at an increased risk. So the effectiveness of antibiotics is, and you all know that, under threat by the development and spreading of drug-resistant bacteria. And antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is now a key cross-border health threat for Europe and the world. In Europe only, AMR causes the annual death of 33,000 people and costs 1.5 billion euros in terms of healthcare costs and productivity losses. So just in April, the WHO published a report stating that we are still failing to develop desperately needed antibacterial treatments, despite growing awareness of the urgent threat of AMR. And in addition, the report revealed that, and I quote, that none of the 43 antibiotics that are currently in clinical development sufficiently addresses the problem of drug resistance in the world's most dangerous bacteria. And it has been underlined over and over that the current antibiotic innovation pipeline is broken. The last antibiotic class that was successfully introduced as the treatment was discovered back in 1987, just to show how long ago this was. Well, I was 2 then. So meanwhile, we assist in an increase in global antibiotic consumption that is not always justified. And it is estimated that up to 50% of antimicrobials consumed in human healthcare may be inappropriate. However, new antibiotics are often associated with lack of profitability for pharmaceutical companies, and their development is costly and their lifespan on the market is short due to resistance development. So therefore, there is a need to support needs-driven models to finance and stimulate antibiotic research and development. And we should, for instance, rethink the economic model so that revenues are not dependent on the volume of sales as a means to ensure both affordability and rational use for conservation of effective antibiotics. And as said, new models are needed, which is why I submitted an amendment to the Parliament's initiative report on the pharmaceutical strategy. And I'm asking the Commission to further look into new dealing pull incentive models, such as market exclusivity transfer and the subscription model for the development of new antibiotics. In addition, the awareness of the relationship between the use of antimicrobials and the development and spread of AMR is still very low. So among other things, we need to stop the misuse and overuse of antibiotics. How many times do people self-medicate and take antibiotics, for example, for the flu? We need better information campaigns so the public is aware that antibiotics are not a cure and for example, do not work when it comes to treating viruses. Additionally, we need to offer alternative treatments and stewardships for healthcare professionals, and monitoring surveillance needed to be strengthened, as well as infection prevention and control. And a focus needs also to be put on better access to rapid and affordable diagnostic tools. So last year, the European Commission published the Pharmaceutical Strategy, whose aim is to improve patients' access to safe and affordable medicines and to support the industry in promoting innovation and research to fulfill patients' needs. The Commission acknowledged science limitations and the lack of interest from industry to invest in the development of novel antimicrobials. It also stated that the strategy would aim at supporting stakeholders to address market failures and at facilitating the need-driven development of new products. And as you might know, I am the vice chair of the MEP interest group on AMR, and we have been trying to put AMR on the top of the policy agenda for this legislation. Additionally, in November last year, a group of 30 MEPs sent a letter to the Commission to stress the need for the strategy to address AMR. In our letter, we recommended addressing the particular market failures in antibiotic research and innovation and increasing transparency in the research and innovation aspects. And in its reply, the Commission underlined the EU commitment to act on the issue of AMR, which is good. And they underlined 3 different points: making the EU a best practice region. This was the first point. The second is boosting research, development, and innovation. And thirdly, shaping the global agenda. We all read the Pharmaceutical Strategy, and AMR has indeed been highlighted. So the Commission also underlined that the Pharmaceutical Strategy will lay out plans for legislative and non-legislative actions in the field of human medicines. The strategy does indeed emphasize AMR, and I'm truly happy about this. Nonetheless, many questions, of course, as you might imagine, remain open, especially on the pilot innovative approaches to research and development and public procurement for antimicrobials, and their alternatives aiming to provide pull incentives for novel antimicrobials with a target date already this year. So, and please excuse if you already explained this before in your presentation, Mr. van Henkel, but let me come to an end. Superbugs resistant to antibiotics not only threaten lives, they indeed undermine every aspect of modern medicine. And this is why we need to act now. We need to act swiftly and quickly to safeguard the scientific achievements of the last century. And COVID-19 already put our healthcare systems under extreme pressure. But this could only be the foretaste of what we could expect from a world where antimicrobials are no longer effective. And with this maybe quite depressing outlook, I'm looking very much forward to the discussion.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. There's too much sunshine for us to be depressed today. Don't you worry.
Okay, good.
Stay with it. Thanks for joining us on time as well. It's very helpful.